12 construction workers vanished from Route 61 on September 3, 2019, and the Highway Department erased every record of their employment that same week. The stretch of road they were building still sits unfinished today, abandoned equipment rusting beside asphalt that ends abruptly at a wall of dense forest. I know what happened because I was the night security guard assigned to protect equipment that nobody ever came back to claim from that cursed stretch of highway. The official report says the crew was transferred to another project, but there was no other project, and their families have never stopped searching for answers. The foreman was a man named Douglas Reeves, who had built roads across 3 states for 27 years without a single lost time incident on his record. His wife still calls me every month asking if I remember anything else, any detail that might explain why her husband walked into the woods and never returned. I tell her the same thing every time because the truth would destroy whatever sanity she has managed to preserve through 5 years of desperate hoping. Douglas Reeves did not walk into those woods voluntarily, and neither did the 11 men who followed him into darkness that swallowed them completely without leaving evidence. I arrived for my shift at 6 p.m. on September 2nd and found the crew finishing their day's work under a sky that looked wrong in ways I could not articulate. The clouds were moving in directions that contradicted the wind I felt on my face, swirling in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost purposeful, almost alive. Douglas waved at me from beside the paving machine and shouted something I could not hear over the rumble of heavy equipment and generators powering the work lights. I waved back and headed to my security trailer to begin another boring night of watching empty road and listening to talk radio until dawn arrived. The first strange thing happened around midnight, when every piece of equipment shut down simultaneously, without warning or explanation, despite being connected to separate power sources. I walked outside and found the worksite completely silent. No generator hum, no idling engines, no sounds of any kind except my own breathing and footsteps. The emergency lights should have activated automatically, but they remained dark, and I had to use my flashlight to navigate between machines that had been running perfectly hours before. I tried calling the equipment manager, but my phone showed no signal, even though I had full bars when I arrived for my shift that evening. The radio in my trailer produced only static on every frequency, a soft hissing sound that occasionally seemed to form patterns almost like words spoken very quietly from very far away. I told myself the nearby mountains were causing interference and that everything would return to normal once whatever atmospheric anomaly was affecting the area passed through. The crew's personal vehicles were still parked in the staging area, 12 trucks and cars that should have been driven home hours earlier when the shift ended. I walked to Douglas Reeves' pickup and found the door unlocked with his wallet and phone sitting on the driver's seat like he had stepped away for just a moment. His coffee cup was still warm in the holder, steam rising faintly in the cool night air, and his radio was playing country music at a volume so low I had to lean inside to hear it. I checked every vehicle and found the same thing, repeated 12 times. Personal belongings left behind by men who had apparently walked away from everything they owned simultaneously. The keys were in ignitions, engines off, doors unlocked, windows down like the drivers had simply evaporated from their seats without warning or opportunity to react to whatever had taken them. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no screamed warnings captured on the dash cam footage, that I later reviewed frame by frame, looking for explanations. The dashcam recordings from all 12 vehicles showed the same impossible event occurring at exactly 5:47 p.m., when the crew should have been finishing their final tasks before heading home. The footage showed men working normally one frame and then showed empty space the next frame with no transition, no movement, no indication of departure in any direction whatsoever. The men did not walk away or run away or get pulled away by any visible force that the cameras could have captured for later analysis. They simply stopped existing in one fraction of a second, leaving behind tools still gripped by hands that were no longer there, and footprints that ended mid-stride. The paving machine operator vanished while seated at his controls, leaving behind an empty cab with the throttle still engaged and the engine still running until it shut down 6 hours later, when whatever killed the power finally reached that machine too. His heart sat on the seat where his head had been, and his work gloves lay on the controls where his hands had been gripping metal seconds before erasure. I called 911, and the dispatcher seemed confused by my report, asking me to repeat the location multiple times before telling me that Route 61 construction had been completed 3 months earlier, and no crew was currently assigned to that stretch of highway. I insisted that I was standing beside 12 abandoned vehicles and thousands of dollars of construction equipment, and she suggested I might be confused about my location or possibly experiencing some kind of medical episode. The call disconnected before I could argue further, and when I tried calling back, the number was no longer in service according to the automated message. I drove to the nearest police station, 23 miles through mountain roads that felt longer than they should have felt given the distance my odometer was recording. The desk sergeant listened to my story with an expression that shifted from boredom to concern to something like fear as I described the abandoned vehicles and the impossible dashcam footage and the dispatch operator who denied the project's existence. He made a phone call that I could not hear clearly and then told me to wait while he contacted someone who could help with my situation immediately. The men who arrived were not police officers, despite wearing uniforms that looked official enough to fool most people who were not paying close attention. They asked me questions for 3 hours about what I had seen and heard, and when I had arrived, and whether anyone else knew about my observations. They took my phone and my dashcam and my personal vehicle keys and told me I would be transported home by agency personnel who would ensure my safety. I never saw those men again, and I never recovered my personal belongings, and I never received an explanation for what had happened to the construction crew I was supposed to be protecting. The next morning I returned to Route 61 and found the worksite completely empty. No vehicles, no equipment, no evidence that anyone had ever been building a highway through that stretch of forest. The asphalt ended at the same point, but the machines were gone, and the staging area had been cleared and grass was growing through cracks in concrete that should have been poured less than 24 hours earlier, according to my own memories of the previous afternoon. I contacted the families of the missing workers and discovered that none of them had any memory of their loved ones ever working for the highway department. Douglas Reeves' wife looked at me like I was insane when I mentioned her husband's name, saying she had never been married and lived alone in the house where I had seen their wedding. Photographs displayed prominently above the fireplace during a visit just months before the disappearance. Her confusion seemed genuine, and her fear seemed real, and I left her home feeling like reality itself had been edited to remove any trace of the men I had watched vanish on silent dashcam footage. I found one other person who remembered the truth, a gas station attendant named Maria, who had sold cigarettes to Douglas Reeves every morning for 6 years and could describe his face and voice and the jokes he told while waiting for his change. She remembered the construction project and the crew and the day they all stopped coming to her station without explanation or farewell. She showed me a credit card receipt signed by Douglas on September 2nd, 2019. Proof that he had existed, proof that he had been real, proof that something had erased him from the world while leaving behind paper evidence of his presence. Maria disappeared 3 days after I spoke with her, and her gas station burned down under circumstances the fire department ruled accidental, despite multiple witnesses reporting that the flames were blue and cold and made no smoke. I stopped asking questions after that because I understood that whatever had taken the construction crew was also taking anyone who remembered they had ever existed at all in the first place. I still drive past Route 61 sometimes, past the stretch of unfinished highway that appears on no maps and leads to nowhere anyone can reach by following the asphalt to its abrupt termination. The forest beyond the road's end looks darker than the surrounding woods, denser, more resistant to sunlight that should penetrate the canopy the same way it does everywhere else in the region. Sometimes I see movement between the trees that could be animals, but moves in ways that animals do not move, too smooth, too purposeful, too aware of my observation from my vehicle parked on the shoulder of a road that officially does not exist. The construction equipment reappeared last month, rusted and overgrown, and arranged in a circle around a clearing that I know was not there when I last visited this site, because I have memorized every detail of this cursed stretch of highway. The machines were positioned facing inward like they were watching something in the center, something I could not see from my position on the road, but could feel watching me back with a tension that felt heavy and patient and completely inhuman. I found Douglas Reeves' Hardit sitting on the paving machine seat where it had been on the night of the disappearance, still clean and undamaged despite 5 years of exposure to weather and wildlife. His name was written inside in the same handwriting I had seen on his work logs, the same crooked letters made by a hand that had been calloused by decades of physical labor. I took the Hardit with me because I needed proof that he had been real, proof that the official story was a lie, proof that I was not losing my mind to memories that no one else shared. The Hardit disappeared from my apartment that night while I slept, taken by something that left muddy footprints leading from my bedroom window to my knitstand, and then stopping, abruptly, like the intruder had simply ceased to exist in the middle of my room. The footprints were too large to be human, too widely spaced, thrust too deeply into carpet that should not have been able to hold such clear impressions of whatever had walked across it, while I lay unconscious in my bed. I have not slept since finding those footprints, and I have not stopped watching the shadows in the corners of my apartment, where the darkness seems thicker now than it did before. Something is watching me the same way it watched the construction crew before it took them, observing my patterns and learning my vulnerabilities, and waiting for the moment when I am finally ready to join the 12 men who walked into the woods of Route 61 and never came back. The highway department has scheduled a new construction project for that stretch of road, approved last week, according to documents I found online while searching for any information. A fresh crew will arrive next month to finish what Douglas Reeves and his team started before something interrupted their work permanently. and erased their existence from every official record. I have tried to warn them, but my emails bounce back undeliverable, and my phone calls go straight to voicemail boxes that are never checked. I have driven to the highway department offices, but the address listed in their directory leads to an empty lot where no building has ever stood, according to neighbors who have lived nearby for decades. The department exists on paper, but not in physical space, a bureaucratic ghost issuing work orders for projects that swallow workers whole and leave behind nothing but rusting equipment and questions that nobody wants to answer. The new crew will arrive on September 2nd, exactly 5 years after Douglas Reeves and his team vanished from dashcam footage that no longer exists because I cannot find it anywhere. They will set up their equipment in the staging area and begin their work and tell jokes and drink coffee and plan for futures they will never get to live. And I will be there watching from the security trailer because I have been rehired for a position I never applied for at a company I have never heard of with a contract I do not remember signing. The paperwork arrived at my apartment yesterday with my signature already on the final page in handwriting that looks exactly like mine, but that I know I did not write because I was asleep when it was delivered, and there are muddy footprints leading from my bed to my desk where the contract was waiting for me when I woke up this morning. I am going to Route 61 next month, and I do not think I am coming back, and I am not sure I ever had a choice about any of this. The forest is waiting, and it has been waiting for a very long time, and I think I understand now why the road was never meant to be finished. Some places do not want to be connected to the rest of the world, and some places have ways of ensuring that workers who try to build connections simply stop existing before they can complete their assigned tasks. I will try to document what I see, but I know the recordings will probably disappear like everything else, and I know my memories will probably be erased like everyone else who remembered the truth about what happened to those 12 men on that September evening 5 years ago. If you are reading this, then something went wrong with their erasure process, and you now know enough to be dangerous to whatever is protecting the secret. I am sorry for what is probably coming for you next, because I have seen the footprints, and I know the size of the thing that makes them. Do not drive on Route 61, and do not take any jobs offered by the highway department. And do not investigate this story further, because investigation is what brought me here, and I cannot leave anymore. The forest is calling my name tonight, and the voice sounds exactly like Douglas Reeves, and I think that means the waiting is finally over, and my turn has come at last.